Ladies and gentlemen, what happens when you take a heavy-duty Chevrolet truck from 1951, give it a second life, put a V8 under the hood, and turn the cargo area into a tiny home? You get one of the most unusual vintage campers we've ever seen. This is the 1951 Chevrolet 4400 camper conversion, a massive 1.5-ton Chevrolet that reportedly began its working life as a railroad delivery truck, later spent time in Alaska, and eventually became a self-contained camper with beds, a kitchen, a wood-burning stove, and even a cab-over sleeping compartment. And here's the part that makes the story even more interesting. After more than 7 decades on the road, this strange piece of American history sold at auction in 2024 for just $935. So how did a 1951 work truck become a home on wheels? Let's take a closer look. Before we talk about the camper, we need to understand what this truck was originally designed to do. The Chevrolet 4400 was not a lightweight pickup. For 1951, the 4400 was part of Chevrolet's Advance design commercial truck range and was classified as a 1.5-ton utility truck. It used a long, fun 61-inch wheelbase, or about 4.09 meters, and was with a dual-wheel rear axle. That long chassis was designed for serious commercial duty. A 4400 could serve as a platform for carrying equipment, delivering goods, or supporting specialized bodies. It was the kind of truck that businesses bought because they needed something stronger than an ordinary pickup. And the particular truck we're looking at is identified by its serial number as a 1951 model built at Chevrolet's Baltimore, Maryland assembly plant with the 4400 series designation. The tag indicates a January build date. So underneath the camper body is a genuine heavy-duty Chevrolet chassis from the early 1950s. And that makes the transformation much more interesting. According to the auction history, this Chevrolet is said to have originally served as a railroad delivery truck. In the early post-war years, trucks like the 4400 were tools. They were expected to work, carry equipment, and keep going. But eventually, its working career changed. At some point, the Chevrolet was converted into a camper, and under previous ownership, it reportedly spent time in Alaska. We don't know every chapter of its life, but that Alaska connection fits the character of the truck surprisingly well. This isn't a delicate recreational vehicle. It's a heavy-duty machine with a long wheelbase, dual rear wheels, simple mechanical systems, and a living compartment designed around practicality. And then there's the chimney sticking out of the roof. That little detail tells you almost everything you need to know about this camper. A camper with a wood-burning stove walk through the rear door, and you're no longer looking at a truck bed. You're stepping into a tiny living space. The camper has wood flooring, white walls, overhead lighting, storage areas, a ceiling vent, residential-style electrical outlets, and a wood-burning stove protected by metal panels. There is even a propane-fueled lamp mounted beside the overhead cabinet. Think about that for a second. Modern RVs are filled with electronics, screens, USB ports, air conditioning, electric appliances, and complicated control systems. This Chevrolet has a stove you can actually burn wood in. It's wonderfully old-fashioned, and it makes the camper feel less like a converted truck and more like a small cabin that happens to have wheels underneath it. The kitchen is surprisingly complete. The kitchenette is compact, but it contains almost everything you would need for basic camping. There's a laminate countertop, a sink, a 3-burner propane cooktop, an icebox, and storage drawers. Nothing is designed to impress you with luxury. Every part has a job, and that's exactly how campers were often approached in another era. Build something useful, keep it simple, and make every inch count. The result is a space that feels almost like a tiny hunting cabin. You could cook a meal, make a drink, sit at the table, and spend the night without needing a campground full of modern amenities. But the sleeping arrangement is where this Chevrolet gets particularly clever. Where do you sleep in a 1951 truck? The answer is surprisingly comfortably. The camper contains 2 twin beds, along with a cab-over bunk positioned above the front section. There's also a folding table, and the areas beneath the beds provide storage and access to the electrical panel. The cab-over section even has its own forward window, So despite the truck's age, the basic layout is remarkably similar to what you'd find in many modern compact RVs. And the dual rear tires give the truck the unmistakable appearance of a serious commercial machine. There are also underbody storage boxes, side steps, sliding side doors, a rear ladder, and a ball hitch. The exterior is finished in black with a white camper body, and the auction description says it was reportedly repainted in the 1960s. But this isn't a freshly restored show truck. There is visible rust, discoloration, and age on the body and roof. And honestly, that makes the vehicle more interesting. You can look at it and imagine that it actually lived a life. The driver's compartment is just as charming. The seats are covered in black vinyl with a bench passenger seat beside the driver. The cab retains its period dashboard, textured metal flooring, wooden headliner, glove box, rifle racks, and floor-mounted gear lever. The steering wheel is red and wears an aftermarket wrap. In front of the driver is an 80 MEF speedometer, while additional aftermarket gauges monitor things such as voltage, coolant temperature, and oil pressure. This is an environment where you don't simply sit down and drive. You interact with the machine. You feel the steering, you hear the engine. You work the gearbox. And every mechanical sound tells you something about what the truck is doing. For someone who grew up around vehicles from this era, that experience is probably instantly familiar. For younger drivers, it would feel like operating a completely different species of automobile. The mystery of the mileage. There's an interesting detail in the auction description concerning mileage. The 5-digit odometer was showing around 5,000 miles, with approximately 500 miles reportedly added during the current owner's time with the truck. However, the true total mileage is not known. That's important because after more than 70 years, an odometer reading on a vehicle like this cannot simply be treated as proof of its lifetime mileage. And there is another unusual paperwork detail. The truck was offered with a Clean Alaska title, but the title identified it as a 1950 Chevrolet, even though the vehicle's identification information and auction listing identify it as a 1951 model. It's one of those little historical quirks that makes an old vehicle even more interesting. By 2018, the current owner had acquired the Chevrolet. Several years later, the truck appeared on Bring a Trailer in Texas. It was offered with no reserve, meaning there was no minimum sale price protecting the seller. The auction attracted 28 bids, and on May 21, 2024, the hammer finally fell. The winning bid was $935 for a vehicle that combines a 1951 Chevrolet heavy-duty chassis, a camper conversion, a replacement V8, an Alaska connection, and a remarkably unusual interior. That final price is certainly attention-grabbing. But perhaps the price isn't the most important part of the story. There are plenty of vintage trucks. There are plenty of classic campers. And there are plenty of custom Chevrolet V8 conversions. But this particular machine combines all three. It started as a working truck. It reportedly served the railroad. It later became a camper. It spent time in Alaska. And eventually, instead of being forgotten, it was preserved as something completely different from what Chevrolet originally intended. That's what makes old vehicles like this so fascinating. They aren't just machines. They're records of how people use technology in the real world. Someone needed a truck. Someone later needed a camper. Someone decided that the old Chevrolet still had another chapter left. And suddenly, a commercial vehicle from 1951 became a tiny home capable of carrying its occupants somewhere far beyond the pavement. Imagine pulling into a remote campsite with this Chevrolet. You shut down the V8. The engine ticks as it cools. You climb out of the cab, walk around to the rear, open the camper door, and light the wood-burning stove. Inside, there's a small kitchen, 2 beds, a table, storage, and a warm glow from the old lamp. Outside, the modern world is still moving. But inside this 1951 Chevrolet, it feels like you've stepped backward through time. That's the real appeal of this machine. It doesn't try to recreate the past with artificial styling. It actually carries decades of history with it. The 1951 Chevrolet 4400 camper conversion is not perfect. It has rust. It has wear. Its history contains unanswered questions. Its mileage isn't verified. Its title even carries a different model year. And mechanically, it's about as far removed from a modern RV as you can get. But that's exactly why it's memorable. This isn't a vehicle built to impress people at a luxury RV show. It's a machine built around an idea that has almost disappeared. Take something old, make it useful, and keep it going.